Welcome to Christina Speaks, 8th episode. Very excited to have Alyssa here with me. Alyssa and I are friends. We go back years and years, so you'll know because we'll be giggling a lot, and that's fine.
Just a few.
Starting off strong.
Just a little. Yeah.
Very.
But one of the reasons why I invited Alyssa today was because Alyssa is an advocate for organ donation, which is something that has touched me personally. And so it's something that I've always heard that she goes around all over Des Moines talking about organ donation, but I've actually never had an opportunity to hear her speak. So I thought, well, I will have you come down and tell us a little bit about what you talk about there. And then that way I don't feel so guilty every time that you post that you're going to go speak and I never go listen. So.
Well, where I go talk about organ donation is driver's education groups. And I go, because it's required by law, driver's education groups for kids to hear a little bit about organ donation. Do I go into the story of how it was brought into my world? Is that what you want to know?
Well, first let's talk about, and I kind of know this story, but refresh my memory. What motivated you to start speaking on the topic?
To heal.
To heal?
In the situation with organ donation and how it was brought into my world was a very traumatic experience. And I found that the more I talked about it, and not from a boo-hoo, feel sad for me, but look at what this person did. And in spite of what happened, not only being able to help others, what else happened? And just reaching out, I speak on behalf of the Iowa Donor Network with that group when I do that kind of stuff. But just being able to then share the facts, but also share my story, it was part of healing, really. That's why I didn't know it at the beginning. I kind of did it to dare myself, because if I could do that, then I could do anything. It's kind of how I get through a lot of things, that. It's like, oh, if I can't do it, let's try it. Let's go on a plane by myself. Okay, cool. But in doing that, I have found in retrospect that it heals. It's healed me in a way that I don't think any amount of therapy, any amount of medication would have done.
And how long have you been speaking to this group?
I've been speaking, the first time I actually spoke about organ donation was in September or October of 2012. So do math, almost 7 years. Wow. And at the place I currently go to on a regular basis, I've been going there since they started. So it's, and in that regard, I go there every 6 or 8 weeks. It's friends. They know my son. I walk in there, and it's just kind of a calming setting in a not so calming topic.
Right.
And I walk in and I say, I know I had the most, exciting topic. And they all just kind of look at me like, oh, you're talking about organ donation. And it's like, let me get to my story. Like, don't shut me down quite yet. So 7 years.
Wow. And how has it changed your approach to talking about it? I am going to just imagine that it was more emotional in the beginning, and now maybe you can maybe infuse more humor into it or something. So you tell me, how has it changed since when you first started?
I used to start off with my story right away. And at that point we were all crying. It's hard enough talking about organ donation and my story in front of regular people, adults, my age or whatever, but you get in front of 14, 15-year-olds and you talk about the story and it instantly brings tears. And so it's evolved to where I've changed and I talk about facts and then I bring in the story and then I finish it debunking some myths. And so it's really become, in the beginning, I really sucked. I mean, and I say that with all of the, oh, don't be hard on yourself. No, I really sucked. Like, I remember some of those times just thinking, what the heck did I talk about? I think you know me well enough to know I can talk around a circle and eventually I'll get back to what I was talking about. But it might take a while to get there, take a loop around 235 and we'll get there. But, and just thinking, what the heck was it? And now I go in and I'm very methodical. And helping kids not just stay where normal people would stay when they talk about organ donation, whether it's the sadness or a relation part of it, like they can relate to it in some way, and staying there, like staying into the impact that can be had on all different levels and sharing that with them. So yeah, it went from being just kind of a time to dare myself and go out there and see what happened, and then sign up for all the volunteer opportunities that I could, find the babysitters, do all of that, and now it's kind of just a consistent thing of I go and I share a legacy, I share a story, and it just so happens I get to share facts too, and do it justice. I've gotten a lot better since when I first started. Tell you what, oh man.
Well, it is. It's not a topic that most people would say, oh, this is what I want to talk about today, or this is what I want to learn about. Right. So how do you kind of hype yourself up before going to talk about a topic that might bring tears or might trigger something in you or in someone in the audience?
I remember why I'm doing it. I from the beginning, and I think you and I've talked about this many times, my why has always been my 7-year-old. He was 6 months old when this happened, but that's my why. Like, why do I continue to go? It's to heal because I want to be the best for him. And being, remarried, it's being the best for that person. It's being the best for my parents, for my sister, for my friends, like being able to do something like this and not be like, heck no, are you crazy? Right. And instead when you say, I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. Let's see what happens. So, yeah.
And you mentioned your 7-year-old, and I know that he goes with you. How does that change your presentation or how you speak when he's in the audience?
That's a really good question. It used to be when he was in a car seat. I mean, he didn't really know what I was talking about. And he'd be like, let's pass out. Let's give him some, toy or whatever. And he would just be in the corner. Now he thinks he works for the owner. He says, I'm going to go and sit with my boss. And I'm like, oh, okay, you go. And she's like, I got him. But he sat there when she isn't there, or, when she is there early on, and he would just sit there and he would listen. The place I go it's a really good place, for driver's education. They have like a little putting green thing, things that during, like between sessions, kids can go do things to kind of blow off steam. Because going 3 or 4 hours learning about driver's education isn't always the most stimulating.
Right.
And Aaron's gotten really good at his putting. But then he'll also sit there. I've seen him times and I look over. Sometimes he's interrupted me. He'd be like, no. And I was like, what do you mean no? And of course the kids think that's hilarious. They're like, oh yeah, what is she telling a lie about? I'm not lying about anything. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm in a speaking area. I cannot scold the children out here like I'm scolding the 7-year-old. But there's also times where, we go there and he knows we're talking about Daddy J, and he doesn't know any different. So I don't change anything to answer your question. I don't change anything because, again, he's my why. And in that regard, it's just something he's going to have to know growing up. And part of me doing it too is to practice so that when he was going to start having those difficult questions and giving those answers, I already had a way of portraying it to someone that isn't an adult and say, well, this is what happened, like clinically, right. Boom, boom, boom. Kids don't understand that. So being able to share with him that part of it, he doesn't know any different.
And has he come away from one of these and been like, hey, Mom, and asked you questions about what is essentially his story as well?
He's starting to. And that's the part where it's a transition again. It's kind of a reset. Okay, how do I want this to come across? Because, he can get his information elsewhere, or he can get it from me. I think we have that similar mindset. You can get it from someone else or me. Who would I want him to get it from? Me. And so I share with him, the facts. He has found every once in a while finding more about Jay, and for me, it's sparking those memories that I can then share with him, that I may have not. I don't purposely forget the stories that I have previous to that day. They just aren't present because survival and living in the moment is what I want to do. But I'll say something that's just brought up in the midst of having the kids laugh because I'm getting them to laugh about organ donation, and then come back and be like, hey, let me tell you this story. So he's learning more about him as we go along. So I assume that's going to get more and more, because he's going to start, second grade seems to be like this big thing where he's like, oh, so what's this and what's that? You don't need to know yet. Like, don't ask that stuff yet. So I'm sure it'll get more. And that'll be coming for you to help me. Because you have an older kid. You can tell me how to deal.
I'll try. And when you're in front of the kids, what do you find is the biggest surprise to the kids? I mean, I'm guessing that they go there because they have to, and they listen because they have to, because they want to get their license and get their freedom.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But, as you're looking out at them reacting to what you're talking about, is it the story? Is it the facts? Is it the myth busting? What do you think really breaks through to them?
It's the fact that I can stand up there and share the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a fun reality.
Right.
To me, you, anybody, it's not a fun reality of how organ donation was brought into my world. That's the part where you can hear a pin drop. And you've asked, like, how do I transition it going forward? At first it was, I do that, well then I lost so many people, they weren't getting the right message. And I don't know, along the way somewhere I heard somebody say, don't have that impact from the get-go. You don't want to lose people right away. So I start with facts, and then I tell the story. And then my deal with them is they cannot stay in that feeling. Like, the story is sad. The story has massive impacts to many people, but don't stay there, because then I get to do my favorite part. And that's the part where I share more about Jay. And, I get to call him a certified computer geek, and they look at me like, oh, she's going to get in trouble. I'm like, no, he would have actually said that, and being able to do that. It's when I'm standing up there and I just say, exactly what happened, and not in like a lot of them. I used to always go on with a big story. I can do that part of it in like a minute. Mm-hmm. And that, it's my credibility. And that's when I hook, because then it's okay. I get it. And there's probably 2 points. There's that. And then, towards the end, when I tell them that although I'm not someone that's on the list of over 600 Iowans that are on the list waiting, I haven't received a donor, like an organ transplant, been a part of it. Words, Alyssa. But I haven't been like a life-saving kidney donor, but I will stand in front of them 100% and say, organ donation saved my life. And I don't think that's what Jay thought it was going to do. I think he understood logically that it was going to help others. I
Right.
don't think he understood it was going to help me. And then in turn, it would help everyone else downhill. And so it's those two moments when they understand that I can actually stand up and say that. And I actually say to them, credibility wise, I share my story, not to get pity, not for you to cry, even though people might cry later, or they may cry and put their head down, and I can see that. I share my story because I will, and I can metaphorically and truthfully, literally. Literally, I have a story. Metaphorically, I can stand there, because the other option would be to be in my bed curled up, or have not gotten up the next day and just kept
Right.
curled. But instead, I continued to talk. And because it was something like this that helped me do that in a different way than I would have never. I mean, this would have never happened.
Well, yeah.
Well, first of all, we wouldn't have met.
Right.
But that would have been tragic all in itself. Oh man, I tell you what. But it brought it into my world to where I've healed, tenfold. Mm. And for the girls, it comes out saying, when I go in there and I say, it's made me a better mom, better blah, 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 all the things. And it allowed me to do the one thing I swore up, down, inside out I would never do. And that was to remarry. I can't tell you how many times that people looked at me and said, your story is not over. You need to find somebody for Aaron. All of these things. And in my head, I would go like this. And in, in my head, I'm like, like,
yeah,
are you
hard
crazy?
to imagine.
Right. And in my head, I remember being like, just shake your head yes, because I'll get them to be quiet. Right. And I would be like, no way. Okay, you can say that, but you're not here in my skin. You're not here in my story. And because of what he very much put in my world, I was not deciding for him. He decided for himself, which is another really cool thing about my story, being able to share that. But he put it in my world where all of the decisions I had to make in that moment, which is like 3 or 4 hours, the one thing that I have not 1 ounce of regret, not 1 ounce what have I ever said, maybe that was the wrong decision, and I also say that it's the one decision out of the many decisions, and you've seen my shoe closet, I have many decisions I've made in the last 7.5 years that are fabulous. Some of them I have in multiple colors, right? But I've made a lot of decisions in these years, and that is the one that I am most proud of. And I've not had 1 ounce of regret. And then, then it's okay, well, what's the second thing? 'Cause it's just like, the second one was getting up the next day. Because I could have just stayed in bed. So I didn't make the decision for me. I made it for him. And I was able to do that because he pounded it into my head, quite literally. And ironically, the only way that it was found out is because somebody found his driver's license. So that connection for me is very real, in that had it not been there, I might have forgotten under the circumstances.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what the question was that we were talking about.
Well, you're taking me back. I remember when I got asked if Warren was an organ donor, and it was minutes after seeing him for the last time in the hospital when he the night that he passed away, and it felt like such a non-thing when they were like, do you know if he's an organ donor? And I said yes, he was. They're like, okay, and that's it. It's a 2-second thing. I mean, if that much. Thankfully, we knew that our husbands were donors. That was something that Warren and I had talked about. He pretty much said, whatever I leave behind, other people can have. So I figured it included his organs, right? He left it behind.
Take it. I mean, if this face and this skin looks good at whatever age I go, that means the facials and all the body treatments were worth it. So, I mean,
you're taking care of yourself now.
Yeah,
so
I'm taking care of it now so that someone else can be fabulous later. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I try to get the kids to laugh too. It's like, you know what? I get all kinds of things done and try to eat healthy. And it's like, if that's good by the time I'm ready to go, like, pass it on. The one thing with Jay was that I always said the one thing that was golden is the one thing that failed him in the end, his heart. But when you're not a life-saving donor, it could be a life-enhancing, which again was something I didn't know anything about at that time. I just knew the answer was yes. It was, I don't know where we're going here. I don't know, breathing sounds like it's optional at this point, although they're telling me to breathe. Food seems like maybe I should do that, but again, not really thinking that's a thing I should do. But, is he an organ donor? Yes, I know that answer. Like, that's definitely cool. Yes. Do. And I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
Well, I've always been curious about this because I know in Warren's case, because it was heart related, there were very few actual organs that could be used.
Oh, yes. Okay. So now you get me on the track. Okay. Thank you. So because he wasn't able to be a life-saving, when you have to pass away in the hospital in order to be considered a life-saving donor, you have to be declared brain dead. And so that's where, like, Jay passed away outside of the hospital. And so for me, not knowing that and now knowing it, I always say they couldn't get his heart because that was gone, a heart attack, whatever. But they got the next best thing. And that's always when people are like, what? Like his bone? Like his vein or whatever? And it was his eyes. I was able to he passed away actually within a month of what would have been his 34th birthday. And on his birthday, no, it was 2 days after his birthday, I got my first thank you note. On his birthday, I actually got the notification that his corneas had been transplanted, and those people can now see. But I always, and he had the baby blue eyes. I mean, you've seen Aaron. They're just, you can see through them. I don't know how you see light through those. I mean, because they just, whatever. But I always use the metaphor that he saw things differently. There's so much hate and whatever in this world, and it didn't matter. He was a DBA, computer geek by trade. But when we moved to the small town that we're in and wanted to be part of the fire department, he didn't care what the color of your skin was, what your religion was, who you voted for that one year. He just wanted to get you safe. And when he became an EMT, I'm like, that's cool. You get people that are pregnant to, when they go into labor, get them to the hospital. That's cool. He did that twice. Once he was in the back, and the next one he was driving. Let's just say they got there really fast. And then he decided not to want to be at the part of the delivery part with Aaron. Thank you, woman who made that happen. But he didn't care. Mm-hmm. And so I always say that those two women, at the time they were 66 and 77, got the next best thing. And I know that his eyesight, his cornea did not portray that part of it. But right. For me, it's a healing part, knowing that that's a part of him that was golden as well. Mm-hmm. Baby blue, but golden nonetheless. So.
And did they use anything else?
They used bone and skin. They weren't able to use veins because actually you can't technically be diagnosed post-mortem with a pediatric heart disease, but that's what they found, mm-hmm. That he had a pediatric heart disease, that his veins were no longer good. So they weren't able to use that. But everything else they've been able to use. He actually, you get a notification every couple of years. I'm not sure exactly how many times you get notified, but there's like a schedule on where it's been, where he's gone. Mm-hmm. And he loved to travel. We did a lot of that. And I think to a degree, I always say he kind of knew he was not here long, because we were going places all the time, Phoenix. So we, travel everywhere. And he had an opportunity to go to, where was it? Somewhere, not Australia, somewhere. Anyway, way over there, long flight. Mm-hmm. And, actually, part of him was in South Korea. And I think that's part of being able, I don't know how that all shook out. But anyway, and he's, primarily on the East Coast with different people. And they kind of they won't share details because that's right. Part of what they are able to keep back. And but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of amazing to see that even in that regard, he's going places. And he's not just here.
Well, and as a volunteer firefighter and EMT, he had committed himself to helping people to the degree that he knew that in and of itself could have been life ending. I mean, it's right. Running into burning buildings or whatever.
And kudos to those who do. Kudos to those. When he told me that, I'm like, you realize that's going into a burning building, right? And he's like, I know. I'm like, okay, I'm just saying. But yeah, I mean, it's to that degree that he just. That was his jam, and it's kind of become my jam after the fact. I didn't realize that would be now I'm hungry for peanut butter and jelly. But it's a really cool thing to do, mm-hmm. is to help others in that regard. So,
and does Aaron ever think of his dad as like Daddy J was a hero?
Yeah. It's interesting because he knows both daddies. One's in heaven and one's here with him. My second husband is the dad that he just made his dad. He kind of decided for me. I mean, I decided, obviously. I went on the date with him and then started it. But he decided that he was going to also be his dad. And in that regard, we talk. And again, it's that if I don't make it common to talk about it, then it becomes something sad.
Right.
And so for me, it's talk about it, because then it's not sad. And it's something to remember this guy who you have his feet, you have his eyes, you have, anybody who knew Jay will look at Aaron and be like, yep, there's no doubt. And then they look at, his hair and maybe his nose, and then that's me, but everything else.
You only carried him for 9 months.
I know. And I did get the hair, the curly, thick hair is what everybody wants. But, it's, if you don't make it common conversation, and so he does. And every once in a while I feel like there's like this sense of just knowing that he's with us. So it's, out of the blue, Daddy Jay, what do you think, Daddy Jay, about this? And I'm like, okay, you want the answer? I'm going to give you the answer. So makes it easier.
Were there any, having gone through, having organ donation be a part of your life in the way that it was, what surprised you the most when you started to do your research and look for facts and myths about organ donation, and how did that compare to what your experience with it was?
Again, I knew nothing about it. And I guess I didn't realize how many people are impacted by it. 113,000 people here in the United States, with all of the medical stuff that we can have to quote unquote fix people.
Right.
And there's 113,000 people in the United States that currently their last resort is to replace what's broken.
So they're waiting for some.
They're waiting.
Organ. And
then, you look at that, and that's a football stadium. Okay, that's a lot of freaking people. And then looking at breaking it down in Iowa, and we're a small state, but 600 is a graduating class to some people, or double, or town. Mm-hmm. Just to think that many people.
So at any given time, there are 600 people in Iowa that are needing
right now,
an organ.
Mm-hmm. Right now, it's ever changing. That's the other thing. The facts they think about it, because I come from data analysis, my background. You wouldn't know it now, and I've been told there are people that questioned it from the beginning, which I'm kind of concerned. But data is my gig. Like I like looking at data. It makes sense to me, and so the numbers really solidified it for me, where it was, in the time that we talk, every 10 minutes on average, somebody goes on that list. One person every 10 minutes. On average, right? So, and then on average, 20 people go off of that list because their wait was too long. Keeping in mind that a lot of those people that are on that list aren't just sitting at home waiting for the buzzer to go off. They're in ICUs. They're at Mayo. They're at, they're place
actively trying to save their own organ,
right,
knowing that it's probably a futile cause.
Correct. So it's not like they're just waiting for, something to go on sale on Target or Amazon or whatever, and sit home and be like, oh, cool, my heart's here. It's a lot more complicated than that. And then you look at that, and for me, I always laugh, because when I started talking, I had to find those things, Christina, that could have the impact, like the story, when to tell the story, and figure it out. And you don't do something until you do it again and get good at it, right? But I always say my speech is brought to you by the number 1. Because one donor has the opportunity of saving 8 lives and enhancing lives of 75 plus. So there's only so much of us that can go life-saving, right? 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, liver. I'm not a doctor by any means, but do the math, right? So one person has the opportunity of doing that much good as a donor, knowing that you can need a kidney, and I might be a very close friend to you, but I can't give it to you because it doesn't match as a living kidney donor. Mm-hmm. Or, God forbid something else would happen to me, I might not be able to give you my lung, even though we've been through the same experiences and basically blood sisters from that regard. We wouldn't be able to help each other.
Right.
So beautifully, uniquely made people, it takes a lot of people to figure out how to help those 113,600 Iowans that need their help. Like, they need something to continue. Like, we want people to continue to live, right? And then, of course, I go there and I say, those are clinical numbers only. And this is the fun part that I've found has helped me really put it together. So I tell you that I'm 100% believe that organ donation saved my life. So where does that put me in the statistics? Because I'm not someone who is on that list getting a lung. I wasn't someone on the list getting, I haven't yet, knock on wood, broken anything and needed like a bone or skin graft or a burn or whatever like that life enhancing / saving donors can do. But I haven't needed that. So, but I can tell you it saved my life. Now, that's from the donor family perspective, is what I'm called, because the donor family says yes and they do their thing, right? You fill out paperwork and whatever. Well, you think about those people who are on that list. It's not just that person that goes on that list. It's their family, their friends, their coworkers. Please get your organ because I don't know how to run this program. Please get your organ because I don't want to raise my kids by myself. I want to be able to have better eyesight from my degenerative eye disease. Give me, I need corneas to continue my life as a grandparent, reading books and knitting and all the things that I want to do, but can't, because I can't physically do it.
Right.
So it's, and you look at those and it's grandchildren and it's children and it's husbands and it's daughters and it's wives and all of the people in your world. The numbers I give them are clinical only, because there's only so much you can give.
Right.
But those numbers it's a ripple effect that is not just a ripple effect in a little lake or river. It's like dump a big freaking rock in the ocean and wait for it to be done, and see the ripple effect that it has, because it goes in places that there's no way they can calculate it. And although that's frustrating to me because you have to be able to calculate everything, it's really inspiring to know that one person can do that.
And I think the reaction that I have gotten has been kind of mixed when people ask me about organ donation in terms of Warren and whether or not he was, and did I make that decision, did he, and all of that. Because people often think that the only ones that are saved are the recipients and the family of the recipients. And from your perspective and mine, I mean, I didn't get into it like you did, but it did bring me comfort when I got that notice that Warren in ways was still giving, and that because of him, there were people whose lives were going to be better, which is what he strived to do when he was alive. And knowing that was still continuing in complete strangers, it felt like, yep, that's Warren. He's still doing his thing. It's
continuing the legacy.
Right.
And again, I don't know that Warren knew that or Jay really knew it from that perspective. And for me, it was my way of coping through it, saying, okay, you're not here to do it, but I'm going to make sure other people know about this. If not for them and not for the 600 and 130, but for their families.
Right.
Because that's my perspective.
Yeah.
Knowing that my grandfather actually was a kidney recipient as well, way back. I mean, I always forget about Grandpa, which obviously it's more in tune to Jay, but it was in my world, not at a point where I could understand it at that point because I was younger. But now I look back at it and think, wow, like how much time that gave me more, like how much more time for my grandpa that it gave me, and my mom and her siblings and my grandma, gave them more time with Grandpa.
Yeah. So you've been on both sides. You've been on the side where that organ, like you said, gave you more time with your grandfather.
Right.
And then on the other side with Jay's organs, it gave you another connection to him and another way to share his legacy. And I mean, what a gift that his son gets to go and listen to. I mean, right now he might be like, yeah, whatever. This is a story that I hear, every couple of weeks.
Right.
But it's keeping, Jay alive to him in a very unique way. I mean, he can easily, there's so much that, like you said, that he's learning about Jay just by listening and being there. And then whatever that provokes in his mind to ask you about later, or to research himself, or to just feel connected. Because who knows how many times he hears something about Jay and it's like, oh, I do that too, or that's important to me too, or so it's continuously giving, even
well, and
in that
it's
sense.
me not forgetting about it.
Right.
Early on, to be honest, it was, sorry, Nate. La 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 la. I don't want to talk about it. I'm not ready to talk about it. But then when I started talking, it was like, okay, let's do this. And the healing that was brought with that is just mind-boggling. But again, it wasn't, this is the other thing I tell the kids. I mean, I go in there and I go in with passion, right? I mean, it's like this and this and this, and you can save people. And I have all of that, and that's great. And I said, but my caveat is I know that this is a personal choice. So though you think that I have all of your names and I'm going to go to the DMV, and when you get your driver's license, I'm going to check off and say, yep, I changed their, I changed their mind. I changed their mind. I changed their mind. Oh, now, what could I have said differently to that person? Can I get a picture of them and look at, like, I don't do that. I don't do it for that because I know it's a personal decision. But I give them information to make that decision. And I tell them to put it on your driver's license, whatever that decision may be, but also tell their family. Right. Because Jay told me, then he put it on his driver's license. Then he registered online. So his thing was, you can forget it. It's on my driver's license. You don't have to have my driver's license. It's on the freaking internet. Somebody will find it.
Right.
And I looked at him and said, wow, I must have forgotten a lot of things in our time together, for him to be like, so you're going to forget it in all different places. And probably the one place that was his last ditch effort for me not to forget was actually one that saved me in the process of all the paperwork a little bit. But honestly, it was the driver's license that caught the medical examiner's attention and started the ball rolling. And ironically, somebody who actually knew him from the fire department, worked on the Iowa Donor Network, was able to come and do the questionnaire for me or with me, like of the stuff. Usually they do it over the phone when it's not life saving. They have to do a lot more paperwork for life saving, a lot of more medical background and stuff. But with this, it was, she was able to come in just because she knew me and she knew Aaron and she knew Jay. So that made it hard, but also, like, I had a familiar face, not a doctor or a nurse telling me mumbo jumbo I didn't understand. Yeah. And she knew his decision. So it was kind of just a reflex, which made it so much easier. So I do preach that to the kids of whatever that decision is, make sure you make it known. And I often tell them, I'm like, I'd even tell your doctor, which then they're just like, whoa, okay. And they go down the black market, the doctors are all bad, and if I tell my doctor and somebody they know is a fit for my organ, they're going to not fix me, which we all know is not true. Doctors want to help.
Not only that, but like you said, they have to be a match. And there's no way that a doctor is going to know. There are very specific tests that have to be done on the organ donor and the person waiting. So it's not like I can just carve out, a piece of a patient and be like, here you go, for $1,000, you can have this heart, because
it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't at all. But I've heard that too. I've heard, the black market, and there's movies about it, and there's, urban legends, people who, I woke up in a bathtub in Mexico and my kidney was gone, like all those urban legends.
That's
and
tequila.
You're right.
That's because of tequila.
But you're right. Like, I have had people ask me that, like, oh, with Warren being an organ donor, how did he know that they weren't just going to let him die to take his organs? And it's like, because it doesn't work that way. Because the test needed in order to know whether he was a match for someone, there was no reason to do those tests on him.
Right.
And, you just have to trust that people don't want to go through the risk of taking out someone's organ or letting someone die for their organ, because even that has to be a certain way. I mean, depending on how you die is how they know which organs. So, if I were just to off somebody, that I might not do it in the way that saves the organs that I want to sell. So, I mean, there's so many factors, but I have heard that before, and I was actually going to ask you about that, because I'm sure the kids hear about those too, and what their reaction is when you kind of bust that myth.
I bust it because I say, there's the oath to be a doctor. And the doctors who are in the ER and the urgent care, they might have gone to the University of Iowa together to school. They might even golf together on Sundays or league on Thursday. They don't do the same thing. They're separate doctors. And so in that regard, they're separate. Now, I get then the question, well, why do you tell your doctor then? And here's my answer. because I didn't have the opportunity to, he didn't pass away in the way that he was considered brain dead and put on life support, and then we could do life saving. He was gone before he got there. So life enhancing / saving, which is the bone cornea, all the stuff that doesn't need to be pumped with blood, was able to be, done. In the event that I would have had that other part, I would have wanted a doctor that I trust to be able to talk to me in those moments, because it's not just, oh, okay, this person comes in, they're not going to make it, let's go ahead and go through the donation process. It's a lot more intense than that. I've never actually been a part of that, but what I understand is it's a lot of tests, it's a lot of communication between the families, it's finding who would be the best match. Oh, we don't have anybody within the perimeter of out of body to transport to get it there, right? I mean, there's a thing where doctors sometimes can think they're God, but they're not. Right. I mean, they know that they can only have it out of, I just keep messing with your microphone. They can only be out of the body for so long. So they do all of that. They won't take what they don't need or what they can't use with as much certainty as can be done with a doctor. That being said, with all of that mumbo jumbo, I would want somebody that could come to me and say, Alyssa, here is the results. Here's what we're looking for. Here's his result. From a brain activity perspective, a doctor, my primary care, whoever, any of my specialty doctors I go to, tell them to be able to, in that regard, that person, I know them, like with Jay's doctor or whatever, them come to me and say, Alyssa, here, I'm a face I'm not out to sell anything on the market or do anything that we shouldn't do, but here's what's happening. Because declaring somebody brain dead is not just, oh, the switch is off. Right. I've never been in that situation, but I can understand logically that that's not the case. So I would want somebody who I trust to be able to give that information to me and translate it for me.
Well, not only that, but I don't know about your experience. I guess you had a familiar face there, but I did not. When I was asked if Warren was an organ donor and I said yes, it was like, the way I remember it was kind of like a Charlie Brown episode. All of a sudden that woman was just going wah, 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 and was explaining all of this stuff to me, and all I remember thinking is, what difference does it make? He's gone.
Right.
Whatever you're going to do to harvest, and I'm sure that they at that point probably explained the difference between life saving and life enhancing and what they could do given when and how he died and all this stuff. I'm sure she explained that. But when you're in that fog of within the last half an hour, you just lost, somebody so dear to you, you're not thinking logically. So luckily that I had that moment of clarity to say, oh yeah, he was an organ donor, because what if I was just completely broken down? It would have been a good thing to have more people know, because if I couldn't react at that moment, or I couldn't answer that question, which is very likely when you have a traumatic experience, like all of a sudden, I mean, widow's brain, like you forget the most common basic things.
Like breathing, eating. You want me to eat? It's going to come back up. I mean, I don't know how, because
I'm sure I showered this week.
Maybe. Sorry.
Wait, did I? Yeah, I mean, when your mind is completely blown away that way, the more people who know and can jump in and say, oh yes, that he was an organ donor, and we can verify, let's look at his license or whatever, because who knows, next of kin, in our situation, we were next of kin because it was our husbands, but if it's our moms and they're losing their child, or if it's, you just never know. So the more people who know your wishes, the better, to make sure that it gets that happens the way you want it to.
Right. And truthfully, that was why he kept saying it to me. It was, don't follow these wishes. Again, I feel like to a degree sometimes he knew he wasn't going to be here long. I see that in hindsight, not at the time. But he wanted to make sure that nobody else would intervene with that. And it wasn't necessarily controversial.
Me. So I was just going to ask you that too. It is a controversial decision. Not everybody agrees with it. So right. Did you personally come up against people who were against it and who wanted to go against what he wanted? Like anyone in his family or someone who said, Alyssa, we don't want him to be a donor?
I didn't have that. I don't know if it was because, again, it was more shock and they didn't realize that it actually happened. Again, and because that was the one thing I knew an answer to. I was like, oh, yes. I mean, I might not know if I'm never be able to eat again, but I know that answer. I don't know if it was that and they were, like, my family hadn't gotten here yet. They weren't at the hospital with us. It was just his family. But also the medical examiner said it in front of his family with his driver's license. So it was that where I'm like, yes. And there was really no discussion afterwards.
Okay.
It wasn't like, are you sure? Like, they kind of just went with it. Bless their hearts for that part of it, because I look back and I'm like, wow. I was kind of like, I made some decisions that I maybe wouldn't have done differently. Not necessarily bad, but it's kind of like, wow, I was very much just, I had to have some control. I didn't have any control, but I wanted some control on what was going on. So maybe that was part of what was just, I said it, Darth Vader, as my 7-year-old knows it now. Like, when mommy does Darth Vader, she means business. And when she starts to count, she's not just doing it so that you can count when you go to school. It's because when she gets to 1, things are going to hit the fan. It's not that, but maybe it was. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's hard to remember. I remember in bits and pieces of, the night he passed away and then the next couple of days. But I do remember being scared to tell the first couple times that people asked me about organ donation, like hesitating and feeling a little bit afraid to say. And I don't know if I was afraid of judgment, afraid of people, thinking or feeling some kind of way about me saying, yes, he was an organ donor, now go forth and harvest or whatever. But, I don't know, for some reason I had some hesitation, and all I can think of is because there still is some stigma. I think especially in communities of color, that fear of, well, we're not that valuable to society, so why not just off a bunch of black and brown people to take their organs,
And, everybody it's a valid response for their fears against what it is.
Right.
I don't ever tell people they can't have their feelings, but it's just, I wish that there wasn't. And I think that it's gotten better, that stigma that you talk about. And I'm not going to say that it's because of me. There's a lot of, there's a NASCAR racer that promotes it because his mom passed away. Joey Gase is a really cool kid. I call kid. He's not a kid. He's married. I think he has a kid now. But anyway, and there's a lot of more publicity on the positive side of it. The honor walk. You might see that when you're looking on the web or whatever, the honor walk where everybody in the hospital watches the person go into the operating room. Heartbreaking, especially if you know the person. If you're invited to go to one, I suggest you do it. It's honoring that last act of love, whatever situation brought them to that. And I think that's reducing the stigma, but it's not going to happen overnight. Right. So that's another reason where it's like, oh, I've done, 10, or 7 years of it. I'm just going to quit. No, there's more kids that need to not have that stigma, no matter the color, their race, their political views, whatever it is. That's not on that list or that information of those 600 Iowans that are on the list, or the 113,000. That's another myth I debunk. They look at it and say, well, I wouldn't want to give to someone who's obviously going to be at the top because they've made all these movies, or they're the president of the United States or whatever. They're going to be at the top because they have fame and money. Well, fame and money can get you a lot of things. It's not going to get you to the top of that list. You have to match to the person. Fame and money might get you to be able to go a different place a little bit easier to get to somewhere because you might not be as terminally ill and you're a perfect match or whatever. But it doesn't get you selected for that part, right? And so I debunk that one because there is a lot of that where I wouldn't want to give it to this person over here because I don't know them very well, but their driving sucks. It's or this is someone different than me, whatever way it might be. Not fame and money is not going to get you to the top of that. That's not in the data that they collect. It's all the medical stuff they need to make the best decision for the donor in making sure that they can take what they can, but for that recipient, because the recipient not only is possibly in the ICU waiting, like the beeper thing, and
Right.
and the putting an organ in a cooler and taking it in an airplane or driving it to the airport and getting it somewhere quickly. That's
Right.
a thing.
Right. It's a real thing. Yes. I know people who have had that experience.
I think we had a driver once. Were you with me when we had a driver, and I asked him what his like a driving company, limo or whatever, and said, "What's your most interesting person you've ever driven?" And he goes, "A heart." And he was taking one from one of the hospitals down here to the airport, and I was like, that is something I would have never thought. Yeah. And while we're at it, why don't I tell you my story? And so I sat in towards the front of the thing, but it is a thing. And, people think because money and fame will get you a lot of things, right? That's not on that list. Mm-hmm. It's
because it's so much more complicated.
And it's updated all the time. Yeah. It's not just, okay, when they go in or when they sign up, it's not the static, it's dynamic, it's constantly changing. They're going downhill. So somebody that was number 5 for heart might go right up to a 1 because of something that dropped, because our bodies are all beautiful and uniquely made. So yeah. It's all different. So,
well, I this is one of those kind of food for thought things. Because I love how there's the two sides of the saving of the life of the person who gets, whatever donated, and then the survivors of the donor, and how you can view organ donation as you have a way to heal, to know that your loved one continues, that their legacy now includes helping people see, or, someone who maybe their confidence was saved because they had a skin graft after an accident or whatever it is.
Right.
So I think it's great that you continue to speak, even though having seen you before you started speaking and knowing you today, I would say very different. Very different light about you. And speaking of you, I guess, because this is kind of a heavy topic, although I feel like we haven't really, it doesn't feel heavy, but I know that it is.
Right.
So just to kind of lighten it up and get to know you better, what are 5 things about Des Moines that are like your favorite things?
I don't think you could be in Des Moines and not like tasty tacos. I know you said not to go to food, but I'm going to go to food first, and then I'll go elsewhere later. And when I worked downtown, the Skywalk, until they were redoing things, and then the Skywalk got all jammed up, and that's beautiful. That's a lifesaver, especially when you work downtown. I think, it's cliche, but it's the people. There's people here that they're kind. I just love, and I'm not necessarily in Des Moines, but even being in Des Moines, it was a really cool thing. Centro. And get food again. Sorry. I'll end it on not food. I'm gonna stick to the downtown feel, and it's the sculpture park. I always love going through that. And actually that's in the same area. There's a food place that we started, and then we went elsewhere, but we went through the sculpture park, and that just continues to be something really cool. A lot of pictures are taken by that, so I like that part of it.
Have you gone to the new Love sculpture yet?
I haven't yet, but I've seen all the pictures, and so I feel like, maybe that's a thing we should be doing. I think it'd be really cool when it's snowing, because then the red will pop off of that. Oh, yeah. But I don't wish snow, so don't hate me, because I know you don't like.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying, Alyssa. We were about to just
I know. I was about to get axed. Yeah. She's going to stop the interview now, because I know Christina does not like snow. I've known you long enough to know it's like snow comes. Oh, don't even. Just tell Christina to slide down her driveway.
Yeah, pretty much.
Grab the sled and hold on.
Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for coming and chatting. And it was nice to just reconnect a little bit. Thank you, everyone who watched. And if you are interested in more information, there is the Iowa Donor Network. If you're not in Iowa, simply Google organ donation in your state, or if you have another resource that you would recommend.
It's donatelife.net, unos.org are places I get information. But every state has an organ procurement organization. So,
and I would encourage you, if you have, some doubts or are wondering how it all works, to reach out to someone like Alyssa or anyone at the agencies and make an informed decision for yourself. And then once you do, make sure that those who know you know what your decision is.
that's the message.
Thank you again, Alyssa.
Thank you.